a speech on the 12th hour, in the 12th day of the 12th month of 2012. And I leave here forever grateful for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Senator from Michigan.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I want to take just a moment to thank our distinguished colleague and my dear friend for his wonderful service. We serve on 3 committees together. It's been my honor to serve on the committee that Senator Conrad chairs, the Budget Committee, and to have him serve as a senior member of the Agriculture Committee, which I chair, and to have both of us sit on the Finance Committee together. Today he has done what he has always done for us, which is to provide vision, common sense, intelligence, and a lot of numbers, and they add up and they make sense. And so, in listening to Senator Conrad's farewell speech, I want to thank him again for giving us a path forward. This is someone who will forever be in the Senate history record as one of the great statesmen of our country. Someone with intelligence, respect on both sides, compassion, a fighter for North Dakota like I've never seen, and someone who serves in the best tradition of what it means to be an honorable public servant. And so he's been a role model for me all the way through to this point, and a dear friend. And I wish he and Lucy and Dakota, who is in fact the 101st Senator, wonderful opportunities going forward in the future. The Senator from North Dakota will be greatly missed, but his contributions will forever be a part of the positive tradition of this great body.
Senator from Vermont.
No, I will yield to the distinguished chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the senator from Vermont.
I thank my friend from Rhode Island. I'll be very brief because I'm going to be speaking later on about the senior senator from North Dakota. Mr. President, I've had the privilege to serve with several hundred senators since coming here. I put in a very small list those who are extraordinary both for their talents and for our personal friendship. Ken Conrad is in that short list very easily. In fact, he defines it in many, many ways. Because what we heard here, as I whispered to him a minute ago, it's nice to hear a grown-up speak on the floor. And he has, I've seen him reach across the aisle. We've been privileged, both of us have been privileged to serve with fine senators from both parties here. But Ken Conrad is unique. Marcel and I value more than I could possibly say here the friendship with Kent and his wife Lucy and the 101st Senator Dakota. But as I said, I will speak later about this senator, but what we heard today was a real giant of the Senate speaking, and I hope that all Americans will listen to the lesson he gave us. I yield the floor.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Before the junior senator from North Dakota speaks, and I appreciate his courtesy in allowing us to make a few brief personal remarks before he speaks, I wanted to say to my friend and my chairman, the senior senator from North Dakota, that yes, in the most obvious respect, he is leaving the Senate, and we will be a smaller Senate for his departure. But in some very important ways, Kent Conrad is not leaving the Senate. I can assure him that for as long as I remain a United States Senator and have the privilege to serve in this body, Kent Conrad will remain in the Senate as an example that I will never forget. As a young senator, tutored by him in the Budget Committee. I can speak for myself when I say that, and I will only speak for myself when I say that, but I am absolutely confident that there are dozens of other members of this body who can say exactly the same thing. And in that sense, Kent Conrad will continue to be an important part of this United States Senate, and the effect that he will have in those years through the example that he has set, echoed down the hallways of time by people who had the opportunity to serve with him, is going to be an immensely valuable one. The characteristics of diligence, an underrated attribute, but an important one, of courtesy, of determination, interesting combination, courtesy and determination, but Chairman Conrad knows very well when to yield and when to fight. There was a politician hundreds of years ago who, in another country who said, one ought not to be obstinate. And then he continued, unless one ought to be, and then one ought to be unshakable. On the things that count, Senator Conrad has always been unshakable. Where progress can be made, he has never been obstinate. It has been my honor to serve with him.
Mr. President. Senator from North Dakota is recognized.
I rise to speak on behalf of the senior senator from North Dakota to thank him for his dedicated service on behalf of the people of North Dakota and the people of this great nation. I think that this is 26 years that he has served in the Senate, and he has always served with great distinction and great commitment. He has been a leader in agriculture and in energy and in fiscal efforts and many other areas. And I have to say, on a personal note, since coming to the United States Senate last year, he has reached out to me and to my family in a very warm and positive way, both personally and professionally. And I would say the same about his wife, Lucy. I think in the finest tradition of the Senate, in the tradition of bipartisanship, in the tradition of working together, in the tradition of truly caring and being committed to getting things done. And so it wasn't just that he reached out on a personal level and said, all right, you know, how can I be helpful? How can we work together? When I had questions or needed assistance, he was there. He was more than helpful. But really, in terms of working on legislation that matters, a farm bill, working together on the Ag Committee, Senator Conrad has an amazing knowledge of agriculture and obviously incredible experience over the past 26 years building good farm policy for this nation. And so to work with him on the Ag Committee was not only rewarding, but I think really an opportunity to craft good, long-term policy for this country that will make a difference. And I start with that example because when you look at it, here we are at a time when we need good policy for our country, but at the same time we need to find savings, real savings that will help us address the deficit and the debt. And so we go to work on a farm bill that's not only responsive to the farmers and the ranchers, the producers of this country who produce the highest quality food supply in the world at the lowest cost. Every American benefits from that. They wanted more crop insurance. We went to work. We improved the farm bill in terms of the kind of crop insurance provides, but at the same time saved $23 billion to help with the deficit and the debt. That's doing things the right way. And if you think about it and you went across all aspects of the things we're doing here, all the different types of policy that we have, if we could do the same thing, craft good policy and find real meaningful savings on a bipartisan basis that empowers the very people that are impacted by that policy, the farmers and ranchers that do such a great job producing food, fuel, and fiber, but at the same time, grow our economy, create a favorable balance of trade, an incredible number of jobs. See, that's the kind of thing we have to do, and I think that's the kind of thing, whether it was agriculture, whether it was energy, whether it was disaster assistance when we had flood and hurricane, whether it was our military. I feel very pleased and honored to have had the opportunity to work with Senator Conrad on those types of issues to try to make a real difference for the people of this country. And so I think as Senator Conrad departs the Senate after 26 years, think about it, 26 years here, conducting himself in a professional manner with respect for this institution, building relationships with senators on both sides of the aisle, but always with a commitment to the people of North Dakota and this country. As I look at the legacy he leaves, I think one of the most important right now is the willingness to work in a bipartisan way to get things done. A practical, pragmatic approach that recognizes solutions are imperfect, but we have an obligation in a bipartisan way to come together and find real solutions for the people of the greatest nation on earth. And it's that legacy, I think, that willingness to be bipartisan and work together that I saw up close and personal here every day. I think it's that legacy, as well as many others, that will continue here in this body when we think about Senator Kent Conrad and his service to North Dakota and his service to this great country. So I rise to say thank you on behalf of the people of North Dakota and this country to my distinguished colleague for 26 years of dedicated service. Thank you, good luck, and God bless in your future endeavors. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from North Dakota.
I want to thank Senator Hoeven, my colleague, for his kind words. I've really enjoyed the relationship. I think you can tell we work together very well. And I hope that serves as an example to others of our colleagues. Even if you're on other sides of the political aisle, you can work together and you can get things done. I also want to thank Senator Leahy, my dear friend. He and his wife are very close friends of my wife and me. Senator Stabenow, the distinguished chairman of the Agriculture Committee. Senator Whitehouse, who served with me on the Budget Committee. And I want to take special note of the friendships that we have enjoyed. Senator Stabenow, Senator Whitehouse will be friends of ours for as long as we are on this earth. And I look forward to our continuing relationship with the Leahys, who, as I've indicated, have become very dear personal friends. And again, in closing, to Senator Hoeven, you know, the best parts of service here are getting things done. And Senator Hoeven has come with that attitude to this chamber to get results for the people that we represent. And I appreciate that attitude, and I appreciate the friendship. I say to the distinguished occupant of the chair, we have had a very good relationship as well. Thank you so much for your service, and thanks so much for this opportunity to have my farewell remarks before the Senate on this, the 12th day of the 12th month of 2012. That's a remarkable set of coincidences. I thank the chair and yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Okaka. Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask that further proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I thank the chair. Mr. President, my fourth and final term as a United States Senator will soon come to an end. As I reflect on that reality, I am, of course, filled with many emotions, but the one that I feel most is gratitude. Gratitude first to God, Creator of life and law, without whose loving kindness nothing would be possible. Gratitude to America, this extraordinary land of opportunity, which has given someone like me so many opportunities. Gratitude to the people of Connecticut who have entrusted me with the privilege of public service for 40 years, the last 24 in the United States Senate. Gratitude to my Senate colleagues whom I've come to know as friends and with whom it has been such an honor to serve. Gratitude to all the people without whose help, hard work, and support I never would have made it to the Senate or stayed here. The gifted and hardworking staff in Connecticut and Washington who supported, informed, and enriched my service here. And the volunteers in my campaigns who gave so much and asked for nothing in return except that I do what I believed was right. Gratitude to all those who labor out of view in the corridors of this Capitol building, from the maintenance crews to the Capitol Police and everybody else anywhere in this building. Thank you for keeping our Capitol running and keeping us safe. And gratitude, most of all, of course, to my family for the love, support, and inspiration they've given me every day of my life. My parents, grandparents, and siblings, my children and grandchildren, and Hadassah, my wife of almost 30 years now, the love of my life, who has been my constant companion, supporter, and partner through this amazing adventure. And so I want to begin this farewell speech by simply saying thank you all. I have a lot to be grateful for. But, Mr. President, being a senator, and since this is my farewell speech, I do have a few more things I'd like to say. I am leaving the Senate at a moment in our history when America faces daunting challenges, both domestic and foreign, and when too often our problems seem greater than our government's ability to solve them. But I can tell you that I remain deeply optimistic about America's future and constantly inspired by the special destiny that I'm convinced is ours as Americans. My optimism is based not in theory or hope, but in American history and in personal experience. I think particularly about my time in public life, and especially the changes that I've witnessed since I took the oath of office as a senator on January 3rd, 1989. The fact is that over the past quarter century, America and the world have become freer and more prosperous. The Iron Curtain was peacefully torn down and the Soviet Empire defeated. The eternal values of freedom and opportunity on which America was founded and for which we still stand have made global gains that were once unimaginable. We've seen the spread of democracy from Central Europe to Southeast Asia and from Latin America to the Middle East. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty in places like China, India, and just about every other corner of the globe. And technological advances have transformed over almost every aspect of our daily lives. When I started here in the Senate, a BlackBerry was a fruit, and tweeting was something only birds did. No more. None of these extraordinary developments happened by accident. In fact, to a significant degree, I would say they were made possible by the principled leadership of the United States, by the global economy and international system that America created with our diplomacy and protected with our military. and by the unique culture of freedom, innovation, and entrepreneurship that flourishes in our country and that remains the model and inspiration for the rest of the modernizing world. We have every reason to be proud of the progress of humanity that has happened on America's watch, and here at home to be grateful for the countless ways in which our own country has been benefited in the process. We live in a world whose shape and trajectory the United States, more than any other nation, is responsible for. It's not a perfect world, I know that, but it is a better world than the one we inherited, and in my opinion, it is actually in so many ways a better world than has ever existed before. Here at home, over the past quarter century, we've moved closer to the more perfect union our founders sought, becoming a more free and open society in ways I would guess those same founders never could have imagined. Barriers of discrimination and bigotry that just a few decades ago seemed immovable have been broken, and doors of opportunity have been opened wider for all Americans, regardless of race, religion, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. During my time here in Washington, we've had our first female Secretary of State nominated and confirmed, and our first African-American president elected and re-elected. And it will forever remain one of my deepest honors that thanks to Vice President Gore, I was given the opportunity to be the first Jewish American nominated by a major political party for national office. And incidentally, thanks to the American people, grateful to have received 500,000 more votes than my opponent on the other side. But that's a longer story. So, while there is still much work to do and many problems to be solved, I believe we can and should approach our future with a confidence that is based on the real and substantial progress we've made together. What's required now is to solve the urgent problems we still have. And what's really required to do that is leadership. Leadership of the kind that's never easy or common, but which we as Americans know we can summon in times of need because we've summoned it before. Today, I regret to say, as I leave the Senate, that the greatest obstacle that I see standing between us and the brighter American future we all want is right here in Washington. It's the partisan polarization of our politics, which prevents us from making the principled compromises on which progress in a democracy depends, and right now, which prevents us from restoring our fiscal solvency as a nation. We need bipartisan leadership to break the gridlock in Washington that will unleash all the potential that is in the American people. And so I would respectfully make this appeal to my colleagues, especially the 12 new senators who will take the oath of office for the first time next month. I know how hard each of you has worked to get elected to the United States Senate. And I know that you worked so hard because you wanted to come here to make a difference for the better. There's no magic or mystery about the way to do so in the U.S. Senate. It requires reaching across the aisle and finding partners from the opposite party. It means ultimately putting the interest of country and constituents ahead of the dictates of party and ideology. When I look back at my own career, the legislative achievements I'm proudest to have been part of, like passing the Clean Air Act in 1990, stopping the genocide in the Balkans, creating the 9/11 Commission and the Department of Homeland Security, reforming the intelligence community, reorganizing FEMA, and repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, all were achieved only because a critical mass of Democrats and Republicans found common ground. And that is what is desperately needed in Washington now to solve our nation's biggest problems and address our biggest challenges before they become crises or catastrophes. Our future also depends on our nation continuing to exercise another kind of leadership, and that is leadership beyond our borders. This, too, has never been easy or popular. Americans have rarely been eager to entangle ourselves abroad, especially at times when we've faced economic difficulties at home, as we do now. There's been the temptation to turn inward, to tell ourselves that the problems of the world are not our responsibility or that we cannot afford to do anything about them. In fact, the prosperity, security, and freedom of the American people depend more than ever before on what's happening in the rest of the world. And so, too, does the rest of the world depend especially on us. I know we can't solve all of the planet's problems by ourselves, nor should we try. But the fact is that none of the biggest problems facing the world can or will be solved in the absence of American leadership. And here, too, I appeal to my Senate colleagues, and again, especially those who will take the oath of office for the first time early in January. Do not listen to the political consultants or others who tell you that you shouldn't spend time on foreign affairs or national security. They're wrong. The American people need us, the Senate, to stay engaged economically, diplomatically, and militarily in an ever smaller world. And do not underestimate the impact you can have by getting involved in matters of foreign policy and national security, whether by using your voice to stand in solidarity with those who are struggling for the American ideal of freedom in their own countries across the globe, or working to strengthen the foreign policy and national security institutions of our own country, or by rallying our citizens to embrace the role that we as a country must play on the world stage as both our interests and our values demand. None of the challenges we face today in a still dangerous world is beyond our ability to meet. Just as we ended the ethnic cleansing in the Balkans, we can stop the slaughter in Syria. Just as we nurtured the democratic transitions after communism fell in Central and Eastern Europe, we can support the forces of freedom in the Middle East today. And just as we were able to prevail in the long struggle against the Soviet Union during the Cold War, we can prevail in the global conflict with Islamist extremism and terrorism that we were forced into by the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. But all that, too, will require leadership in the United States Senate. It will require leaders who will stand against the siren song of isolationism, who will defend our defense and foreign assistance budgets, who will support, when necessary, the use of America's military power against our enemies in the world, and who will have the patience and determination when the public grows weary to see our battles through until they are won. Mr. President, I first set foot in this chamber almost exactly 50 years ago in the summer of 1963, inspired, like so many in my generation, by President John F. Kennedy and his call to service. I spent that summer right here in the Senate as an intern for my home state Senator, Abe Ribicoff. He was and remains another personal hero of mine. And although I never would have admitted so publicly back then because it was so presumptuous, I came away from that experience with the dream that I might someday somehow return to serve in this place. Well, I've been blessed to live that dream. And that is what America is all about. We have always been a nation of dreamers whose destiny is determined only by the bounds of our own imagination and by our willingness to work hard to realize what we have imagined. Indeed, long before the United States came into being as a government of institutions and laws, it was a dream, an implausible, incredible dream animated by faith of a country defined not by its borders, nor by its rulers, nor by the ethnicity of its founders, but by a set of eternal and universal principles that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are God's endowment to each of us. That was the dream that gave us our existence and our purpose as a nation, and it is the dream that for more than 200 years, through every passing generation, has been reinventing, renewing, enthralling, and surprising us, the very dreamers who are living that dream. I leave this chamber as full of faith in the dream called America as when I stood here nearly a quarter a century ago to take the oath of office for the first time. And as when I first came here nearly a half-century ago as a 21-year-old, the grandchild of 4 immigrants to America, the son of wonderful parents who never had the opportunity even to go to college, but made sure that my sisters and I did, and gave us the confidence to pursue our dreams, which was their American dream for us. America remains a land of dreams and a nation of dreamers. I know that my own story repeats itself today in millions of American families and their children. And as long as that is so, I know that our best days as a country are still ahead of us. And so, Mr. President, I will end my remarks today where our country began a long time ago, with a dream and a prayer that God will continue to bless the United States of America. I thank the chair, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arizona.
I will have a lot more to say about my friend from Connecticut in the next few days, but in the meantime, I want to thank him for a very important and a very visionary and a very wonderful statement, and we thank him for it. I yield.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague and friend from Connecticut on behalf of all the people of our state for his lifetime of public service. Our lives have been intertwined personally and professionally for almost 40 years. And I had the privilege of coming to know Senator Lieberman's family, his parents, who gave him the values and ideals that he has expressed so eloquently and powerfully, repeatedly throughout America, as he did today on the floor of the United States Senate. And that dream, which they inspired, is indeed a uniquely American dream. But it is rooted also in the Stanford and Connecticut community that we shared, the ideals of faith, education, intellect that he has exemplified, and those qualities of independence and courage and perseverance in the face of adversity that he has so embodied and taught so many young people and others around our state and around the country, and of course the ideals and goals of civility, and maybe most important for this body, the ideal of public service, which he has exemplified through all of these years, an unremitting, unstinting, unwavering commitment to making the world a better place, person by person, individual by individual, helping make America equal to that great ideal and dream that he has articulated so eloquently. I have been privileged also to know Joe's wife, Hadassah, who has added so extraordinarily to his life and made possible so many of his achievements, and this tribute is to her and his family as well as to him. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of working with Senator Lieberman, a real honor, and I look forward to continuing my work with him, although it will no longer be in this chamber, just as I worked with him before reaching here, following, in a sense, his professional path as a state senator, as Attorney General, and now here. Many of our colleagues will come to the floor in these remaining days of this session to commemorate the tremendous legacy that he leaves. And it is a legacy of action, not just of words, as we have heard today, but action and achievement. He's been a steadfast supporter of family planning and a woman's right to choose, raising awareness and garnering commitment of congressional colleagues for that cause. He has been a champion of equality and justice, exemplified, for example, in his advocacy of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He's been a leader on environmental conservation as Attorney General of our state, as well as in this body, especially in the fight to protect Long Island Sound, a treasure of Connecticut and the entire nation. And he was a leader in bringing to this chamber, to the floor, one of the first bills on climate change. His legacy will live on in these efforts, the clean air and water that he's helped to protect, the urgency with which he's fought to protect our natural treasures in Connecticut and around the country, and his spirit of environmental stewardship that will inspire generations to come. And that ideal of stewardship is also articulated by his remarks here. The stewardship of democracy, of our republic. One of Senator Lieberman's signature accomplishments has been the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, which he aimed to consolidate disparate agencies to facilitate interagency communication. In the wake of 9/11, he made that a mission, and he achieved it as chairman of the Committee of Homeland Security and Government Affairs, as well as a leader on the Armed Services Committee. And on that committee, Armed Services, he has championed a strong and vital national defense, which remains as essential now as it has been throughout his career. I'm grateful to Senator Lieberman's support for a bill that I recently introduced, the End Trafficking in Government Contracting Act, which addresses the serious problem of human trafficking by federal contractors and subcontractors. And his support for that measure, I think, demonstrates again his commitment not only to equality, but helping and working with others in this body who share his goals on a bipartisan basis, as that measure has been and was and will be, as is the cause of ending human trafficking and achieving human rights. And most recently, in a very personal way, I observed Senator Lieberman's deep empathy for people who are victims of natural catastrophes. When the recent spate of storms struck Connecticut, Irene and Sandy, I toured with him places, seeing in his eyes and in his voice his sense of how individuals and their families are affected by this kind of natural disaster. He is a person of heart and of soul, of big heart, and a soul that reaches out to people. So I thank him for his great work, his contribution, his unstinting generosity to the people of our state, Connecticut, through all of his years of service in many different positions, in many different ways, in a myriad of places throughout our state and throughout our nation. And I thank my Connecticut colleague for dedicating his life to public service. I look forward to being with him, if not in this chamber, in many other places around the country, and continuing to admire his great contributions to our country as well as to our state. Thank you, Senator Lieberman. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Connor.
President.
Senator from Nebraska is recognized.
I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to thank the people of my great state of Nebraska. It's been a tremendous honor to have had the opportunity to serve the state for 20 years, 8 as governor and 12 as United States Senator. The people of Nebraska are generous and hardworking, and it truly has been a privilege to have served them and represented them. You know, I'd also like to thank my parents, Berdella and Benjamin Nelson. Raising me in McCook, Nebraska, they instilled in me the values that I've tried to embrace and which serve me as guiding principles in both public and in private. I especially want to thank my family for their unwavering love and support. As my colleagues know, public service requires our families to sacrifice privacy and sacrifice the ability to determine their own schedule, among many other things. And so I sincerely thank my wife, Diane, our 4 children and 5 grandkids for their patience and understanding. While it's hard to walk away from this body, I must say that I'm looking forward to getting to spend more time with my family. As a public official, the lens through which I have always tried to view decisions is, how will the policy or this vote or this decision impact my community, my state, and my country? This focus and advocacy for my home state has resulted in both praise and criticism at various times, but I stand here today proud of the accomplishments achieved over the last 12 years and grateful for the opportunities afforded to me by the people of Nebraska. Arriving in the Senate in 2001, I recall thinking about what one of my predecessors in this body, Ed Zirinsky, used to say. Senator Zirinsky said that the biggest problem in Washington is that there are too many Democratic senators and there are too many Republican senators. There are not enough United States senators. Unquestionably, my proudest moments in the Senate are those efforts that were bipartisan and pursued by a collective motive to get the best possible result while maintaining the dignity of this institution. Probably the most straightforward example of this work is the compromise achieved by the Gang of 14. As many of my colleagues will recall, in 2005, there were several judicial nominees presented to the Senate for its consideration, but which had not yet received an up or down vote. The majority leader at the time, Senator Frist of Tennessee, was considering what became known as the so-called nuclear option, which would have changed the Senate's rules so that the minority party couldn't filibuster a judicial nominee. There was a great deal of concern at the time about how this would impact the Senate's long-standing tradition of majority rule while recognizing minority rights, and what this would mean to the way the Senate conducted its business in the future. At the time, Senator Lott and I convened 12 of our colleagues, 6 additional Democrats and 6 additional Republicans. Together, we met and exchanged ideas about how to find a sensible way forward that would satisfy all 14 senators such that each would agree the Senate was dutifully carrying out its advise and consent responsibility without unduly restraining the ability of the minority to assert itself in instances when it found a nominee truly and substantively objectionable or unfit to serve. Ultimately, an agreement was reached by this bipartisan group. There was not a rules change, and in the midst of a highly partisan environment, the Senate moved forward in a positive way, and I believe we did the right thing. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia was a critical member of the Gang of 14. In addition to his many, many accomplishments over the years, everyone knew then and knows now that there isn't anyone more well-versed in the history of the Senate or who was more protective of it as an institution. And I'll never forget that after the agreement was finalized and we were all sitting in a room, Senator Byrd said that he was proud of the work accomplished and that we, quote-unquote, saved the Senate. Hearing those words from the distinguished Senator Byrd was undoubtedly one of the proudest moments of my career. And besides Senator Byrd, I've had the opportunity to serve with so many dedicated public servants in this body. I'd like to thank all of them. I start naming some, I'll leave some out. So I just want to thank all present and past members of the Senate that have worked with and thank them for the occasion that I've had to work with them so closely. I also share the sentiment that many of my colleagues have noted in their farewell addresses, that of appreciation for the efforts of staff. Over the last 12 years, I have worked with an incredibly dedicated and talented collection of individuals. We call on our staff to do a lot of work, often in a very stressful environment. So I want to thank everyone who has worked in my offices back home and the office in D.C. over the last 12 years for the work they've done on behalf of our office and for the state of Nebraska. And if I were to leave this body with one thought and hope for the future, it would be this: Congress needs to change its math. By that, I mean members of Congress should be more concerned about addition and multiplication and less involved in division and subtraction that seems to overtake this institution at times. My hope is that in the process of doing this, that Congress and our nation will have a stronger desire to find solutions for the country's greatest challenges, more so than any effort to try to drive our citizenry apart. And with that, I will just say one more time, thank you to my family, to my staff, to my colleagues, and most especially to the people of Nebraska. Mr. President, I yield the floor. With the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Akaka.